Good afternoon, and welcome to the second meeting in 2020 of the Scottish Commission on Public Audit. As always, can I ask members and witnesses at the outset to keep their questions and answers concise and to the point. We'll just note that we've received apologies from Alison Johnson, MSP. And we move to agenda item 1, declaration of interests. Can I welcome Anas Sarwar to the meeting, who joins us in his capacity as acting convener of the Public Audit and Post-Legislative Scrutiny Committee. Anas, do you have any interests relevant to the remit of the Commission to declare?
Good afternoon, Chair, and it's good to be part of the committee. I have no interest to declare.
Thank you very much. I'll now move to item 2 in the agenda, which is the decision on taking items in private. The Commission is invited to take item 4, consideration of evidence heard, in private. Is the Commission agreed? I'll take silence as agreement. Thank you. So we move on then to agenda item 3, which is Audit Scotland's annual report and accounts 2019-20. Members have a copy of the annual report and accounts, as well as a management letter from Alexander Sloan in their meeting papers. And I welcome to the meeting Alan Alexander, Chair of the Board of Audit Scotland, and I think it's your first meeting actually with the SCPA as Chair of the Board. And Alan's accompanied by Caroline Gardner, Auditor General for Scotland, Diane McGiffin, Chief Operating Officer, and Stuart Dennis, Corporate Finance Manager, Audit Scotland. Now, today is actually Caroline Gardner's last appearance before the Commission, before she demits office, and I want to put on record the Commission's thanks to Caroline and appreciation for your work as Auditor General over the past 8 years, a period in which, of course, I've actually been in the chair and been dealing with you. I would like to thank you for your participation and engagement, which has been excellent with SCPA, been greatly appreciated. Particularly your engagement with the Parliament in general, and also the Parliament's Public Audit Committee, and widely your involvement in the work of the Scottish Parliament's Budget Process Review Group. Now, before we move to questions, I'd like to remind everyone that because of the challenges of managing a virtual meeting such as this, we're going to take questions in a pre-arranged order. However, if any member has a supplementary to any questions, please type R in the chat box and I'll bring you in as soon as I can. As always, I'm grateful if questions and answers are kept as succinct as possible. Finally, I would remember members to give broadcasting staff a few seconds to operate your microphones before beginning to ask your question or to provide the answer. I'd now ask Alan Alexander and then the Auditor General to make any short introductory remarks.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. I think, as we're all acutely aware, in the final months of 2020, the world changed profoundly. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, public bodies and public services have been operating under tremendous pressure and continue to do so. Like others, I'm immensely grateful to the work going on across the public sector to help us through this crisis. For Audit Scotland, COVID-19 and the measures taken to contain it have meant rapid and massive changes to the way we work and the way our colleagues live. In the course of 24 hours in mid-March, we changed from an office-based operation to a virtual one. I want to place on record my thanks and respect to the staff of Audit Scotland for their agility, professionalism, dedication and good humour during this most significant upheaval that we've seen in our lifetimes. Our priority has been the safety and well-being of our colleagues. The Board has focused on ensuring good governance and oversight in these ways of working, and this will continue to evolve. Our role as a Board is to oversee the exercise of all functions of Audit Scotland. Audit Scotland supports the Accounts Commission and the Auditor General to provide independent assurance to the people of Scotland that public money is spent properly and provides value for money. To do this, we have to do 3 things. We must safeguard our independence, we must uphold the quality of the audit, and we must ensure that we are focusing on the issues that really matter and will improve the services that people across Scotland use and rely upon every day. In a moment, Convener, I'll hand over to the Auditor General, who is, as you know, also Audit Scotland's accountable officer, to make her opening remarks. Before that, I think it's important to highlight that this is a time of transition for both Audit Scotland's board and for the organisation. As you mentioned at the beginning, Convener, this is my first meeting with the Commission since coming into post as Chair in April. And I'd like to thank my predecessor, Ian Leach, for his stewardship over the past 5 years. 2 other board members will also finish their terms in the coming months. Graham Sharp is stepping down as Chair of the Accounts Commission, with Elma Murray coming onto the board as the Interim Commission Chair. And non-executive member Heather Logan, who is currently Chair of the Audit Committee, will enter term in September. I thank both Graham and Heather for their contributions and wish them the best for the future. And I perhaps should say also, Convener, that we look forward to welcoming the 2 new independent board members as soon as their names can be given to us. Let me now turn briefly to Audit Scotland and the Auditor General. As you've just said, Convener, Caroline Gardner's 8-year term comes to an end this month. Caroline has been an exceptional Auditor General. Anyone who has worked with her or come in contact with her can attest to her professionalism, expertise and insight, as well as the fact that she has that crucial quality of empathy. As Accountable Officer for Audit Scotland, she has been a superb and well-respected leader. So Caroline, thank you for all you've done. I'm sure we'll continue to see you make a significant contribution to Scotland and to Scotland's public life in the years to come, whatever you decide to do next. With that, Convener, I'll hand over to Caroline to make her opening statement.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to the Chair for your kind words, which are much appreciated. I would normally use this opportunity to look back over the performance and achievements of Audit Scotland over the last 12 months. Instead, I'd like to start by paying tribute to Scotland's public services and all the people working to save lives, support communities and protect jobs. COVID-19 has put our society under tremendous strain, and it will be some time before we understand the full impacts. In those circumstances, good governance and financial management are more important than ever, and we're acutely aware of the pressures and limitations that public bodies are working under. Our response is and will be to ensure that audit is flexible, pragmatic and consistent. We're working through our priorities and our work programme to ensure we can deliver a strong audit service to the Parliament and focus on the issues that matter. It's important to remember, though, that the pandemic comes at a time when public services are already facing a good deal of pressure and uncertainty. Demands and expectations continue to rise, alongside static or reducing budgets. And the public sector has also had to prepare for the prospect of the UK's withdrawal from the EU and the associated uncertainty. At Audit Scotland, we've sought to ensure we have the capacity to meet our growing responsibilities and continue to deliver high-quality audit work. COVID-19 means we have also had to change how we operate, and that will continue to evolve. Finally, as I end my term as Auditor General, I'd like to say thank you to my Audit Scotland colleagues. Over the past 8 years, I've been proud on a daily basis of their professionalism, their commitment to improving public services, and their resilience, never more so than in recent months, and I thank them all for their support and friendship. I'd also like to thank this Commission for the important role that you play in supporting a public audit regime in Scotland that we can all be proud of. As always, Chair, we're happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go straight into questions then, and perhaps I can ask the first one. On page 9 of the annual report, Audit Scotland states that it has started to implement its digital audit strategy, including introducing data analytics and employing the first dedicated digital auditor. How will data analytics enhance audit techniques, and will these actually result in a more efficient and cost-effective audit process?
off before handing over to Diane McGiffin, if I may, Chair. As the Commission knows, we've been investing in our digital capability for a number of years now with your support. And that investment has been critical in enabling us to pivot to remote working, to virtual working as of the middle of March this year. The data analytics strategy actually predates the pandemic and is aiming to look at both what we audit, the investment that's being made in digital by the public bodies that we audit, and how we do it, making sure that we can use digital to look in a more wide-ranging, less sample-focused way at the records and approaches taken by audited bodies. Diane, I wonder if you could amplify that for the Commission, please.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon to members. We've been investing, as the Auditor General says, in digital for quite some time, and that has a twin track approach, both our own digital capacity, so the infrastructure that we have, which has over the past few months enabled us to move, as the Chair said, to work entirely virtually overnight. Our digital auditing strategy has been developed and progressed both through our Performance Audit Work Programme, which the Public Audit and Post-Legislative Scrutiny Committee has considered the outputs from on several occasions, and also through our audit methodologies. So at the moment, we are taking stock of a range of improvement projects that we have, given the disruption to all of the work that COVID has brought. And our intention is to bring even more closely together our digital services capacity and our digital auditing capacity, so that our auditors can work online first if they need to, and that we can advance some of the audit methodology and audit technology projects that we already had started, but which have become perhaps more urgent for us to deliver. So we have strengthened our staffing. We have employed a key specialist. We have enhanced our data analytics training for all colleagues, and that was a feature of our learning and development programme last year. And we have also been building our networks within the organisation of digital interest and expertise, led by some of our teams who are very skilled in this area. We've developed quite an extensive programme of speaking to public bodies about our work. We're very well connected in the digital arena, and we see this as an area of work that will continue to grow. So that's hopefully helpful. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. You say this is your first dedicated digital auditor. What other dedicated staff do you have on the digital side? Because, as you say, over the years you've been investing into this area, quite rightly, and in previous years you assured us that your ability to audit IT and digital services and so on was being enhanced year on year and was at a reasonable level. So overall, what are we looking at within Audit Scotland as to its capability? How many dedicated staff do you have?
We have a team of computer auditors who have worked in a traditional way in auditing the IT systems and the risks associated with them in all of the bodies that we audit. But our digital strategy over the last couple of years has been, as Diane said, focused on making sure that all of our audit staff have got much greater digital awareness and skills, since so many of the public services that we audit now rely on digital. And we are, as you asked in your original question, following closely the developments in using data analytics to carry out audit work and building up our capacity and our skills in that area. So, as it says in the annual report, our digital audit team is moving to being much more focused on the way public services are provided through digital platforms rather than IT systems in the way they would have been in the past. We are building the data analytics capacity to make sure that the staff we have who already have an interest and skills in that area have got a professional grouping and a professional home within the organisation. and really trying to make sure that we can resource our work in ways that are flexible to make the best use of all of those skills to reflect the particular circumstances and risks we see in each of the audited bodies. The number of staff involved as specialists is relatively small. It's fewer than 10, but those people we are looking to really leverage to make sure that they are working directly on the audits with the most significant risks and opportunities, but that their skills are available to all of our staff involved in audit work, because actually there are a few things we look at now that don't have at least a digital dimension, even if they're not fully digital, and that will have ramped up very significantly over the last 3 months, I think.
Thank you. Now, I know that Rona's going to have to leave the meeting early due to parliamentary business, so I'll invite Rona in now if she's got any questions she'd like to ask.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, good afternoon, panel. Professor Alexander, in your opening statement, you said one of the key responsibilities of Audit Scotland was to uphold the quality of audits. In the paper Quality of Public Audits in Scotland, published earlier this month, only 25% of Audit Scotland staff state that they feel they've had the time and resources required to deliver a high quality audit. This is a significant decline from over 60% in 2016-17, when this information was first recorded and reported, and it represents something of a downward trajectory. Can I ask what measures Audit Scotland are taking to address the concerns of a significant majority of the staff of its in-house teams?
Thank you for that question. Let me answer it from the point of view of the board's oversight, and then hand over to Diane to provide you with the detail you've asked for. What I'd like to say to the Commission is that the board monitors this kind of issue very closely indeed, as does the Remuneration Committee, which I've chaired until very recently, and the Audit Committee. And we assure ourselves that when there is an apparent drop of this sort, that the management action is being taken in a targeted and effective way to ensure that we deal with any problems for the audit that produces. I hope, Convener, it'll be acceptable if I hand over to Diane to provide some detail on that for the Commission.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and please be assured that we considered these results very carefully and take them very seriously. And it was disappointing, but sadly not unexpected, that people felt under pressure last year to deliver audit work. We knew that there was pressure in the system, and we had taken action to resolve that. What the survey shows is that the impact of the action did not come through quickly enough for the peak in audits. And for that, we're very sorry, but we're also very grateful to our colleagues for the work that they did under difficult circumstances. To give you a flavour of the things that we've been working on, we've been working to keep the establishment levels very high indeed, so filling vacancies very quickly when they arise. One of the pressures last year was driven by our expansion as an organisation. On the plus side, on the positive side for colleagues, we had many new opportunities arising because of the new financial powers work, and many colleagues were promoted and took up new roles. That left some vacancies and gaps. And we filled those, but that took us longer than we had expected. But we have increased recruitment to maintain establishment at high levels. A particular pressure for colleagues is peak auditing times. And we've taken into account all of the factors at work that cause pressures there, including the timing and appointment of recruitment to professional trainee schemes, our engagement with student placements, ongoing work on creating a pool of colleagues who might work with us on a seasonal basis rather than using agency staff, and looking at the opportunities for former colleagues who may wish to come and work with us on a restricted basis. However, those measures, which we've been working on very diligently for this summer's peak, may not be the measures that will help us through different peaks of work that the disruption COVID has caused will bring to our work planning, and we're keeping that under review. We recognise that we need to have more agile movement between teams. A particular issue for some teams last year was they were hit by very difficult sets of circumstances, very small teams hit by difficult sets of circumstances, and we were not able to find adequate resourcing solutions quickly for them. And that's something that we are geared up to move more quickly on. We've been working closely with our Health and Safety Committee and with our PCS union to discuss resourcing issues throughout the year. And we had a small team who led a project to look at all of the possible options to improve resourcing for this year. And there are many good actions out of that. As I said, however, because of the disruption caused by COVID, we're not quite sure that all of those will be the actions that we will take over the expected peaks of work this year.
Thank you for that answer. Can I just quickly follow up? So when you talk of resourcing issues, are you talking about staffing issues? And are you satisfied that that has been resolved to an extent? I hear you say it might not be ready for this summer, but if you could maybe just clarify when you talk of resourcing issues, what exactly you mean.
Thank you. We're talking about both the people that we have and also the demands that we have on us, so the two parts of the equation. We've looked at both parts of the equation. We've tried to eliminate or pause unnecessary work or work which was not needed or not required at the moment. We're going through a huge reprioritisation process anyway to enable us to deliver accounts for this year. But we had already started to look quite critically at what the demands are on us and how we could better meet them or pause some of them, as well as all the resourcing and people that we have and what they're doing and how we're phasing and managing all of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
I think Bill Bowman wants to come in with a quick supplementary. Bill?
It was actually on a previous one, so I'll pick it up in my own question if that's okay.
Well, in that case, I was just about to call you anyway, Bill, so carry on.
Thank you. In a sort of similar vein, Audit Scotland has recorded an underspend against its training budget of 24,000 this year, and marginally the actual figure reduced from the previous year. Now, in the previous mentioned report on the quality of public audit in Scotland, 60% of the staff of Audit Scotland's in-house teams felt when they were surveyed that they have had enough training and development to enable them to deliver a high quality audit. And that apparently is the lowest rate relative to all public audit providers included in the survey. So does the 2019-20 underspend on training contribute to the responses of staff in respect of their personal professional training and development? And what measures are in place or are being planned to address the feedback received from your in-house teams?
Dan, can I ask you to pick that one up again, please?
Thank you, Auditor General. One of the factors which reduced the number of training days that we had last year, we moved our all-staff conference to take place in this financial year, and that would be one day of training for every member of staff because it covers technical and other matters. So that would have reduced the average number of days by approximately 1 day per person. Last year, because of the resource pressures which we were experiencing in some areas, and which I've discussed in the earlier answer, we also rescheduled some of the training and paused some of the training so that people were not having to choose between making their audit contribution or delivering training courses at particular times. And we're catching up with all of that. And we've moved a number of our training events. Online at the end of last year. There are some differences in how how we record training and how all the firms record training. But we take the trend very seriously, and we're looking at that. We have a very strong programme of professional development and support. And even just this week, IPAS have delivered online for us a training session for all staff out of the reviews that they've done of audits. This is under review. We are keen to explore the opportunities that operating virtually at the moment gives us to enhance training, but we're confident that we are meeting most of the training needs that are identified through our performance development programme and 3D conversations, and we are trying to balance that out with resource demands.
I mean, if you look at page 42 of your report, it gives you the number. Over the year, staff received on average 7.7 days of formal training, formal learning and development per person, which if you take a 5-day week, I suppose is a week and a half. Does that include all your students? Because they would seem to get more training.
I don't think that does include the students. I think that's calculated separately. I can come back to you with details of that.
Well, the note doesn't make it clear which way it is, and it doesn't give any comparatives. And if that's an average, then the worry is that some people get more and some people get very little training. Is that so?
I think that there will be variances, obviously, as you would expect, but we do have a comprehensive training programme covering professional development, career development, and other items. We delivered a lot of learning and development last year. There have been a lot of changes in the professional requirements, and we've been following up with that. And we do look at the training needs of teams. We've been having discussions with teams about the training that they have, about their views of training, and so on. So I think that we're engaging with this issue very strongly and looking to offer a very comprehensive mix of training for colleagues, balancing that with pressures.
More information on the 7.7 days would be helpful, and I suppose as someone who has given training in the past, it's not just delivering it, it's the feedback you get and how well it's taken and the uptake by the trainees. Can I maybe then just move on to a couple of other...
Carry on.
On page, I think, thank you. On page 2, you mention about us, our vision is to be a world-class audit organisation that improves the use of public money. And you mention this world-class terminology quite often throughout the report. Can you just perhaps explain a little bit more? What is a world-class audit organisation, and are you one?
I'll start off on that one, if I may, Chair. That's been our vision as an organisation for a number of years now, I suspect at least 5 years. And I think it has two dimensions to it, which we monitor carefully. The first is making sure that our audit quality framework is absolutely compliant with international standards on auditing and with the INTSI standards for supreme audit institutions for performance audit work. We are unique among the UK public audit agencies in having a comprehensive audit quality framework which covers all of our audit work, financial audit, performance audit and best value, whether it's carried out by Audit Scotland teams or by firms that we appoint, that the Accounts Commission and I appoint to carry out the audit work. And we report the results of that annually. And you will see from our annual report that our results are good and improving. We have very solid assurance that we're meeting those standards and learning from the feedback we have from the independent reviews carried out by ICAS each year. The second strand to it is our international strategy, where we are looking to learn from and to share our own good practice and expertise with other public audit agencies around the world. and you will see from our international report that we have a good deal of interest from overseas audit agencies in the things that we do, in the ways that we work, and we very much value the networks we have globally that allow us to learn and compare our own performance, but also to share the good practice we have in place. So they're the two primary indicators we have of being a world-class audit organisation. We then, as you know, report our impact in a number of ways, including the annual report and account you've got here, but also impact reports on individual pieces of audit work, which are in the public domain once they've been published.
Well, I suppose I know that this has been mentioned for some time. After 5 years, are you a world-class organisation now?
We think it's probably not a thing you ever achieve. We continue to improve, and standards around the world continue to improve. We all know the challenge that the audit profession in general has been under over the last couple of years. I think the important thing is our commitment to continuing to achieve, to exceed those international auditing standards, the ISAs and the INTERSI standards, and to keep on learning from our peers globally. I'm not sure we'll ever be in a position where we can tick the box and say that's done, but we are confident that our performance is up there in a world-class context, and that we continue to improve it year on year.
I just think if you have a vision, it might be useful to show some progress or achievement against that, rather than just stating it as a vision. But let me move on to, unless you, sorry, did you want to say something?
I was only going to say very briefly, Mr. Bowman, clearly this is the overall annual report and accounts, our corporate plan and our corporate performance reporting, which goes to the board on a quarterly basis, sets out a whole range of performance measures, our progress against them and the next steps we have planned. And again, all of that's available in the public domain from the board papers, which we publish on our website each time. I'm very happy to talk you through that if that would be useful, but we summarise our performance in the annual reports and accounts.
It's just it was on page 2 and seemed to be at the top and seemed important. As I said, the question I was going to ask earlier, and it's a more simple one, on page 66 in Intangible Assets, we were talking about a digital auditor, which I thought might be some form of artificial intelligent robot, but maybe not. Software you've retired, disposed of £344,000 worth and added in 51,000. How does that sort of tie into what we were speaking about in terms of more time on digital work?
The intangible assets are software licenses that we need to use our work. I'll ask Stuart to talk you through the detail in just a moment, but you'll see that in broad terms, we are spending more on software and less on hardware to support our digital working, in line with the general move to operating through cloud computing rather than through software which is held and operated on our own servers. Stuart, can you talk Mr. Bowman through the
I was just going to say, it seemed to be a big number you've taken out and not very much added in.
Stuart can talk you through the detail of that.
Yeah, the disposals for the year, we moved on to a new fixed asset system. There was a tidying up. Wrote off old licenses that had actually been fully depreciated in most cases. The additions for the year, the main addition was a new upgrade HR system, and that's what the addition is. So it's really a tidying up exercise of the gross book values and the depreciation that had been accumulated.
Okay, so you're tidying up old stuff that's been depreciated, added in an HR system. So where does the digital auditor and the more time spent on digital working, where are the costs coming for that?
The digital auditor would be an individual post. It's not an actual system as it stands at the moment. We're developing in-house our own system. So that would not be an additional increase in the intangible assets.
Okay, so it's something you're developing yourself. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Claire?
Thank you, Bill. Can I now turn to Anna Sarwar?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. In the report, the gender pay gap shows that, male staff on average earn 12.79% more than female staff. This despite the fact that 3/4 of its senior management team are women, and more than half of the organisation-wide leadership group are women. Given that women hold a majority of senior positions across Audit Scotland, what are the other explanations for the reported gender pay gap?
I think, Mr. Sarwar, this is one of those figures which shows you the limitations of any of these single metrics that aim to capture something complex like gender equality and gender discrimination. We pay serious attention to this, as does our board and our remuneration committee. And what has made the difference over the last couple of years, actually, I think, is the efforts we're making to make sure that the really key group of staff we recruit as professional trainees are as balanced and diverse as they can be. What we have seen is an increase in the proportion of our trainees coming in over the last couple of years who are female. They are people who will progress through the organisation as they qualify and move into more senior roles. But as they come in on our training grades, they have the effect of bringing that pay ratio down rather than moving in the other direction. As you say, our performance at management team and the leadership group is good in terms of representation and pay equality, but that the overall metric is affected by our success in bringing in female trainees who will progress through the organisation in the years ahead, but now are bringing the gender pay gap ratio down below where we'd like it to be.
Good. That's good to hear. What about the equality gap more generally? Any analysis on ethnicity, race, any other protected characteristics? There's a lot on gender, but nothing on anything else.
The gender pay gap is what we're required to report. As you will know, we do take diversity in all its facets very seriously. And we have an equality and diversity working group in the organisation which looks both at our performance as an employer, but also in our audit work and how we take it forward. I'll ask Diane in a moment to give you a bit more information about how we monitor our performance as an employer. But I would say one of the challenges we face is that it relies on people declaring their ethnicity, their status in terms of being disabled or not, and some other protected characteristics, and we don't have 100% reporting on that. Diane, I wonder if you could give Mr. Sarwar a bit more information about the way we monitor and manage those important aspects of our performance as an employer.
Thank you. We monitor all recruitment activity, and we monitor and report on the progress of recruitment, selection, appointment, training, and progression for all protected characteristics in our diversity monitoring reports. We are required to publish that data every 2 years, every year, and will shortly be considering it at management team and board. If I could amplify the Auditor General's earlier point on the gender pay gap, to give you an example, as at the 31st of March 2019, 73% of our lower quartile employees in the lower quartile, which is where our graduate entrants would come, were women, and that has reduced the median rate of pay. We're shortly to publish our figures for 2020, and they will show a reduction in the pay gap as people have progressed through the scheme, and we'll send you a copy of that report as it's available. Almost 7% of Audit Scotland's workforce are from Black, Asian or minority ethnic groups. Among trainee auditors, that's about 13.5%. Last year, about 13.8% of applicants for all our roles were from Black and minority ethnic communities, which was down slightly from 14.5% the previous year, but 8.1% of our appointments were to Black and minority ethnic colleagues, which was up from only 3% or 3.3% the year before. Our graduate training scheme is the key entry route to the organisation. I think we've stressed that many times for you. It's essential for us to keep recruiting and training and providing a good experience to our trainees most of whom we want to keep in Audit Scotland and in the public sector where we can. We currently have 43 trainees, and we work very hard to reach out for graduate recruitment. We hold open evenings, we attend many recruitment fairs, and we also look to reach out to schools and other organisations to encourage people to think of auditing as a career if that's not an obvious route for them. We have 4 school leavers in the ICAS training scheme, the straight in from school scheme, and that's going well for us. And we also have 2 modern apprentices. We monitor all our HR performances and statistics and report on them, and work hard to live up to our aspiration to be a great and diverse employer.
Excellent. I really appreciate all of that answer, and I would expect nothing less from Audit Scotland but to be an exemplar of organisations across Scotland. I suppose as a follow-up to that, Auditor General, is we do, when you evaluate all the organisations that you audit each year, consider gender disparity. Why don't we as a practice look at race disparity as well?
I'm not sure that's a question for us, Mr. Sarwar, as opposed to for government. I suppose I can say that as part of the best value duty on councils, diversity and equality is one of the characteristics which councils are required to live up to demonstrate, and therefore the auditors are required to and will look at the way in which each council is doing that, make a judgment on how effective it is, and share good practice for others to learn from. It's not something which we have done direct work on in the central government and health parts of our responsibilities because of the differences in the governance regimes, but we do ensure that in the annual reports and accounts all public bodies are reporting the information that they're required to, and that information is checked back to the underlying systems to make sure that it can be relied on, that it's robust and fair. So we do some work there, but one of the continuing conversations we have through our Equalities and Human Rights Advisory Group and with the Equalities and Human Rights Commission is how we can make sure that our respective responsibilities and roles complement each other, rather than adding burdens which don't lead to real change but do provide an extra overhead on the bodies concerned. I'm sure it's a conversation we would be happy to continue with you as this work evolves in the months ahead.
Thank you. Would you need government permission to do a race disparity audit across Scotland's public sector?
We wouldn't need permission, but as always, there is a question of where we are making best use of the resources that are available to us through this commission and through the audit fees that we charge, and how we are making sure that our work complements rather than overlapping with the work of other organisations like the AHRC here in Scotland, and the statutory responsibilities that bodies have. That's not to rule it out, but it is to say that at this stage it's never felt like the area where we could add most value. But it's a continuing conversation. You're quite right to highlight it.
I look forward to having that conversation with you further, Auditor General, and with your successor in due course. I want to turn to another area, which is around complaints. I saw from the report that there were 4 complaints recorded over the year, but it was only 2 complaints that were investigated and not upheld. Can you just clarify why only 2 of the 4 complaints were investigated?
Yes, briefly, and I suspect that Diane may want to add to this. One complaint was assessed as being outside our complaints handling procedure, and the complainant was redirected to the Ombudsman, the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman, as being the appropriate person. After additional correspondence with us, we were able to provide some more information, but it wasn't a complaint that was within our complaints handling procedure. One complaint, I think, is ongoing at this stage, and we can't give more information than that at the point the annual report was concluded. One was not upheld, and in fact the other 2 were both not upheld, although in one case we found we could have communicated in a more timely manner than we did in practice. So we aim to learn from the complaints in each case.
Just for clarification, Auditor General, of the 4 complaints, 1 was out with scope, so was referred, 1 not concluded but is being investigated, and 2 investigated and concluded.
That's right.
Thank you, Auditor General. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Anas. Just 1 or 2 small ones to finish off with here in the questions. On page 63, there's a number of budget lines there, but the one that stands out is the expenditure on communications, that's telephone and postage, and it's exceeded its budget by 66%. Now, it's not a huge sum in itself, but for such a limited expense, telephone and postage, it seems quite a high percentage. What are the reasons, and is this an ongoing thing?
I will ask Stuart to give you more detail, but if you look at the 2 lines, 2020 and 2019, you'll see that there was a fairly significant reduction from 82,000 in 2019 down to 63,000 in 2020. Stuart, I wonder if you could answer the Chair's question about the spend against budget in 2020, please.
Yeah, the actual, as the Auditor General said, has come down from last year. The main reason behind that is the mobile telephone contract that we had. The old one was concluded in August last year, and we negotiated a new one for a much better cost than we were paying. So that's why it's reduced, but there was still an overspend last year, but that should flatten out this year and we should be on budget.
Okay, so it's a bit of a blip. Can I also ask you, this year or last year, you had a record number of Section 22 and Section 102 reports, highest number you've ever produced. Does that increasing requirement to produce Section 22 and Section 102 reports, which presumably are somewhat more complex and require more digging than your normal reports, is that a significant additional work for the auditors, and how are you managing the pressures that might arise from that?
You're right to highlight them, Chair. As you know, Section 22 reports are the vehicle that I have as Auditor General for drawing to Parliament's and the Public Audit Committee's attention issues that have arisen from the audit of individual bodies. Section 102 reports are the equivalent in local government, where the Controller of Audit reports to the Accounts Commission. By their nature, they're significant. They're generally things which have gone wrong in a public body, although occasionally they will be an update on a matter of significant public interest, like, for example, the Section 102 report on the City of Glasgow Council's settlement of its equal pay claims. And they do require significant additional time and expertise from auditors to conclude. We think that the increasing number, which has gone up in 18-19 as well as 19-20, does reflect the pressures on audited bodies, which I referred to in my opening statement. We keep a small budget available for exactly that type of work, which we can use to pay the firms or to make additional resources available to the in-house teams to do the necessary work, and indeed to support me in presenting a Section 22 report to the Public Audit Committee. But where the volume of work exceeds the amount that we've budgeted for, then we have to accommodate it by flexing the programme overall, delaying some pieces of work or reducing them in scope. So they are a significant part of our work, which we have to actively manage year on year. And we have flagged the increasing number because I think it is a trend that we are watching very closely at the moment.
Within the trend for these additional reports, is there anything within the reports that are of a common type? And what I'm groping for here is how it impacts on in terms of the complexity within the report. So, for example, we know that IT comes up a lot. Does that engage much more resources from Audit Scotland than if it was in some other area? I'm just groping a bit here to understand.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right to ask whether there are common themes, and IT services has been a common theme in my areas of responsibility, as you've seen on the Public Audit Committee. They do require extra resource. I wouldn't say necessarily more again compared to, for example, the work we've done on NHS Tayside over the last few years. Both of those do require senior staff and expert staff. They're expert in different ways, but I don't think it's necessarily more for IT systems than it would be for the sorts of complex governance problems we've seen at NHS Tayside. I think I'm right in saying that in the Accounts Commission's area of responsibility, procurement has been a common theme, and the Accounts Commission and Audit Scotland have produced some guidance with Police Scotland called Red Flags, which is for audited bodies, setting out some of the warning signs that audited bodies might be looking at and for when they're concerned about good practice in procurement. So we look ourselves for those common themes, because ideally we'd like to be able to get in upstream and stop problems from occurring. Equally, we want to learn from them in looking at the risk assessment we're carrying out for individual bodies in future years.
Thank you. Just a quick other question. On page 23 of the report, you say that the COVID-19 situation has increased the risk in this area as some people / organisations are seeking to exploit the situation. Is that a sort of a warning shot of problems that are going to be coming down the line? That there's been some breaches of IT security that's going to entail more resources?
We certainly are seeing, both ourselves as an organisation and as the auditors of 200 plus organisations around Scotland, increased risks around cybersecurity with the overnight move to remote working that we've all had to undertake since the middle of March. Within Audit Scotland, we've seen an increase in the number of phishing emails that we receive. We've seen some increase in sophistication with them being targeted to particularly senior people in the organisation. And we've seen general pressures on our IT systems and the security of our data. So far, we've been able to manage all of that, but it has put a lot of pressure on our digital services team, and our auditors are seeing the same sort of pattern in the bodies that they audit. At this stage, I can't give you any indication of the impact that it's had other than the pressure it's putting on the people responsible for digital security, but it is an audit risk that we're looking at closely, as well as managing in our own organisation.
And I was looking at page, I can almost not read it, 63 is that? Annex B, point 4, other operating expenditure, where fees and expenses to appointed audit firms, there's been a fairly substantial increase in payments to further education colleges, the audits in further education colleges. Is there a significant reason for that?
Stuart will keep me straight and may want to add to what I'm about to say. But yes, we have seen increased fees for individual colleges being agreed between auditors and the colleges themselves, reflecting some of the challenges that they have been facing, which I've reported to the committee, both in the annual reports on colleges and in a disproportionate number, I think, of Section 22 reports on individual colleges within the sector, reflecting the relatively small governing bodies they have and the pressures they're facing with financial pressures, nationalisation of terms and conditions, and the changes to the curriculum that we're seeing across the country, so that there is a good reason for it, reflecting again the risks which the bodies are operating with.
Is that likely to be a trend?
I don't think we're likely to see it continuing to increase, but we have seen it increase as we've carried out the annual risk assessment and been through the discussion of audit fees between the auditor and the college itself. And
just so quickly on page 64, operating income, I'm just looking at the fees and charges payable. In the NHS, they seem to have dropped.
Yep, they have reduced very slightly. Again, that comes to a large extent from the annual assessment of risk which is coming through, but I'll ask Stuart if there's anything extra he'd like to say about either NHS bodies or FE colleges. Stuart.
Yes, in respect of FE bodies, Auditor General is quite correct. I mean, there isn't a pattern there where additional fees have had to be negotiated and charged, that they've been agreed with the audited body, and it's due to additional work that's required there, and that's the pattern that's been for this year. I wouldn't expect it to go up the same level for next year, but we never know what's going to happen there. In respect of the operating income, the slight decrease is purely due to being slightly behind where we were last year in respect of health bodies. The position that we were in starting the new 1920 audits, we are required to recognise the amount of income in respect to the work that we've done to that point. So we were slightly behind track, and some of that could be, well, down to COVID-19 and access to health bodies in March. And that's the reason why there's a slight decrease in the operating income.
Okay. Now, before I close this section, can I maybe just reflect again on the fact that Caroline Gardner's stepping down in early July? And Caroline, maybe this is a good time to ask you to maybe reflect on your experience a little over the past 8 years and what messages you might have for the Commission. What could we be doing better to support?
Thank you for the invitation, Chair. It's very welcome. First of all, I think it's important to say that the SCPA plays a really important role in ensuring the independence and the sustainability of public audit in Scotland. Having this very direct reporting line for the Auditor General and the organisation into Parliament is a key bit of making sure that we can provide the independence and the quality of public audit that I think Parliament needs and requires to carry out its work well. I do know that it's only a small part of your work as MSPs and perhaps not the reason you came into politics for. So I'm very grateful to the commitment you all demonstrate to fulfilling that role. As you know, the Audit Scotland Board is responsible for overseeing the governance of the organisation and making sure that we live up to the standards that we expect of others, which is something we take very seriously. And the SCPA's role is different from that. You're responsible for appointing the chair and the independent members. I think it's really extremely helpful to have you engaging with the strategic issues that we're facing to make sure that we're considering them properly and planning for them well. And a good example for that has been our response to Scotland's new financial powers over the last 4 years. A really significant change in what the government has to do and has the opportunity to do. Big questions for us as auditors in how we can develop our capacity, our skills and expertise to do that and to add value as parliaments, scrutinising some quite different decisions about revenue raising, about long-term financial strategies rather than how the budget should be spent from one year to another. And we've been very grateful for your encouragement and support as we've built the capacity to let us underpin Parliament's work in those areas. It's one of the achievements that I'm proudest of in my time as Auditor General, and I think the Commission has done a great job in engaging with us to understand the issues and then encouraging that work as we've developed it over time. These formal meetings are clearly a central part of your work and they allow us to demonstrate in a public way our accountability to the Parliament. It's obviously important that continues. I think I'd say that the less formal business planning sessions have also been very useful from our point of view in helping us to set this type of meeting in context, to answer any questions that you and other Commission members may have about our work, and to help develop that insight sort of behind the scenes into the things we're grappling with, what we think is working well, and what perhaps we're finding more difficult to get right. Overall, I'd say this direct connection to the Parliament is an important part of public audit in Scotland. I've been grateful to the Commission for your challenge and support over the last 8 years, and I know that Stephen Boyle, as my successor, will be keen to engage with you and with your clerks to look at how we can continue to make this a productive working relationship in future, as well as demonstrating that all-important accountability and good governance.
Caroline, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the members of the Commission and wishing you very well in your future endeavours as you go on to ever greater things from here. And I'm sure we'll meet again at some point in the future. Before I move to the next panel, I'll just suspend briefly for a changeover of witnesses. Well, welcome back to that event. I'd like to welcome to this meeting Stephen Cunningham, Partner, and Gillian So, Audit Manager from Alexander Sloan. Now, before we move to questions, I'd like to just remind everybody that because of the challenges of managing a virtual meeting such as this, we're going to take questions in a pre-arranged order. However, if any member has a supplementary to any question, please type R in the chat box and I'll bring you in as soon as I can. Equally, if any member doesn't want to ask a question, indicate that to me in the chat function always. And as always, keep your questions and answers as succinct as possible. And finally, just to remind you, members should give broadcasting staff a few seconds to operate your microphones before beginning to ask your question or to provide an answer. So, would either of the witnesses like to make an opening remark before we ask questions?
Good afternoon, Convener and Committee. I can confirm that we've received all the necessary information and explanations we require in order to allow us to undertake our audit of Audit Scotland for the year ended 31st March 2020. I can also confirm that there was no limitation in the scope of our audit work. If I may, I'd now like to give you a brief overview of our work. Alexander Sloan were appointed by the committee to carry out the external audit of the 2020 financial statements of Audit Scotland. I am the partner in the audit and the responsible individual. During the year, we attended all audit committee meetings of Audit Scotland. Our interim audit was conducted in February at the offices of Audit Scotland. The final audit was carried out remotely due to the closure of Audit Scotland's offices because of COVID-19. I can assure the committee that working remotely did not impact us in gaining sufficient audit evidence, and the audit was completed without any significant problems. As part of our work, we also reviewed all internal audit reports during the year and held discussions with Audit Scotland's internal auditors. The audit file was also subject to second partner review in accordance with our quality control procedures, and that review was carried out by our senior partner prior to the signing of the audit report. All our audit was carried out in accordance with international standards in auditing, and as I mentioned earlier, we received all information and explanations that we required to form an audit opinion. Based on the audit work, we form an opinion on whether the accounts should give a true and fair view, whether they've been prepared in accordance with international financial reporting standards, as interpreted and adapted by the Financial Reporting Manual, and to confirm that they've been prepared properly in accordance with the Public Finance and Accountability Scotland Act 2000 and directions by Scottish ministers. We are satisfied in all 3 points, and therefore we've issued an unmodified audit report. In other words, we are satisfied the accounts do give a true and fair view and in accordance with legislation and accounting standards. And the accounts and audit report were signed on Tuesday the 9th of June. We're also required to prepare a management letter based on our findings, and the purpose of this report is to summarise the key audit issues arising from our work and report any weaknesses in the accounting systems and internal controls that have come to our attention during the audit. I'm pleased to report that in the course of audit work we didn't find any weaknesses in the accounting and internal controls. And finally, I'd just like to record my thanks to Audit Scotland and the support staff at the SCPA for their assistance during the audit. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. You've already comprehensively answered the first question I was going to ask, so I'll move on to Anas.
Thank you, Chair. Audit Scotland has included in its accounts perceived income it's going to receive from work in progress, and that's based on a judgment of work being completed but not yet charged to audited bodies. Are you satisfied that the calculation of the income to be received for work yet to be completed is accurate and robust?
Yes, we are. We spend a significant proportion of the audit looking at this particular area. We look at the methodology, we look at the time records, we look at the accounting policies, and from all of that work, we're satisfied.
Thank you. That's the only one I had, Chair.
Thank you, Anas. Bill, can I bring you in here?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify one or two things then? I'm glad you mentioned the internal audit review because in, I think it's page 29 of the annual report, Audit Scotland says BDO, who are the external internal auditors, a review of our risk management arrangements provided positive assurance and we achieved the highest risk maturity assessment available. Could you tell me what a risk maturity assessment is, by any chance?
I know the internal auditors in their work, they looked at just the risk systems with Audit Scotland, and they just make a judgment based on that work, just in terms of how mature they feel Audit Scotland's procedures are. We're not directly involved with the internal audit, but we do look over these reports, and if there's any issues that we feel that come out of that may cause concern for our external audit.
I maybe should have asked in the previous session, but anyway, I think it sounds like a good thing. In terms of the going concern for Audit Scotland now, I think we probably know that they are funded by the public sector, either from the Scottish Government or from the various local authorities where their fees are paid. And there's probably no long-term uncertainty about that. But in the short term, everybody's under pressure to minimise probably cash flow outgoings, or they are short of cash. Do you look at what immediate liquid resources are available to Audit Scotland? And if, let's say, some of their receivables were a bit delayed, do they have enough cash or resources to borrow to keep making their monthly payments?
We've had a number of discussions with Audit Scotland. We do that every year, but in particular this year where there's added complications of COVID. We do look at budgets. We have discussions with them in terms of their fee. I think naturally there will be some delays just with the nature of organisations and cash flows and problems with COVID-19. But yes, we look at all of these, take that into account when we are looking at our going concern discussion. Based on that, we were happy. They were still a going concern and they were being for cash flow. I know in the discussions they may come back to Parliament to have in terms of their budget. Certainly some audits will be delayed and there's been an extension of audit timetables from that. But no, we had a number of discussions and we looked at the various information available and we were happy with that.
But if they had an issue, would they have to come to the Scottish Government? Can they take money from a bank account? Do you know where their liquid resources would come from in a moment of difficulty, shall we say?
I think for more information, Stuart would be the person who would give you more detail on that.
Okay. And finally then, in terms of the financial statements, one area that perhaps we do particularly rely on your expertise is where there are specialists involved and there are technical accounting requirements, for example, around the pension costs and liabilities. Can you confirm that you're satisfied with all the disclosures relating to the pension costs and liabilities in these current financial statements?
Yes, we are. We've spent a lot of time to look at that, and we've also considered the reasonableness of the assumptions used, and we were satisfied.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bill. I think that that's all the questions that we have for Alexander Sloan. Thank you much for your attendance there. I think that that completes everything and concludes our evidence session. I'll take the opportunity to thank all our witnesses this afternoon and to say that the Commission particularly is appreciative of the work that's been done to produce the accounts on time, given the challenges of remote working. That concludes the public part of today's meeting, and I'll allow a couple of minutes for members to have a comfort break before we resume in private session.